Good evening, everyone. My name is Shannon Carroll, and I'm the Director of Museum Education and Community Engagement here at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. And thank you for joining us for this evening's Artful Evening. I want to acknowledge a couple of guests who are with us this evening, including Lindling Liu's family and friends, Tim and Joy Light, who have sponsored the Joy Light Gallery of East Asian Art, where Lindling's exhibition is installed, as well as the president of the Gilmore Festival. We partnered with the Gilmore to borrow this piano for this evening's performance. So thank you for joining us as well. Lindling Liu is best known for her hard-edged, circular abstract paintings with concentric rings of color. Her human-scale tondos have been described as inducing states of meditation, and her work includes minimalist sculptures of interlocking wood blocks, shaped paintings, and sewn fabric collages. Lindling Lu Musical Meditations opened here at the KIA on February 19th. The exhibition contains a series of paintings created from 2019 to the present, many of which were composed during the 2-year period of the ongoing pandemic. Lu views these works as a means of healing from the chaos and uncertainty of life. Her large circular canvases pulsate with color and invite viewers to reflect on their own memories and connections with music. Lindling Liu's work is included in public and private collections, both nationally and internationally, such as the Microsoft Art Collection, Capital One Headquarters, City Center DC, Hall Arts Hotel, and the permanent collection of the Embassy of the United States of America in Beijing. Lindling Liu earned a BFA in painting from the Maryland Institute College of Art, MICA, in 2008, and an MFA from the Hofburger School of Painting at MICA in 2011 with honor. She currently lives and works in Baltimore, Maryland, and she has spent the last several days driving with her family from Baltimore to Kalamazoo, and we're so thrilled to have her and all of them here with us this evening. Please join me in welcoming Lindling Liu.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. My name is Lindling Liu. Before I start, I would like to thank Kalamazoo Institute of Arts and Hanfield Artworks for giving me this opportunity to share my work with Kia audience. First, I want to thank Rehema Barber for her tremendous support to the show. And many thanks to Shannon Carroll and the museum staff who made this exhibition possible. And my appreciation goes to Miss Joy Light. It's a privilege to exhibit my work at Joy Light Gallery of Asian Art. This is me when I was 7. I was born in a mountainous area in southwestern China named Zunyi. My father plays Chinese string instruments and my mother loves to sing. It was the early 80s and many things were opening up. Music from abroad was allowed to enter. My father found some Western classical music for me to listen as a baby. There were many pieces by Frédéric Chopin, includes his nocturnes and waltz. When I was at age 4, my parents bought me a medium-sized electronic piano. At the beginning, they took me to group music lessons. A few years later, after switched several music teachers, my father found a local composer and pianist who was able to teach Western music theory and professional piano techniques. During that time, piano training was very strict, and the rules had made me to be a more disciplined child than I could have become. For about 12 years, I practiced almost every day. Music became a daily routine and company. I had to pause the everyday practice at around age 16 due to a demanding schedule at a boarding school getting prepared for college. In 2001, I was admitted to Landscape Architecture Department of Beijing Forestry University to study landscape planning and design, history of Chinese gardens, garden design, plants, soil, flowers, plant ecology, and so on. When I studied in Beijing, there was no daily access to a piano. My curiosity turned into painting, drawing, and reading. I took studio art classes and spent time wandering around in ancient gardens, sketching, and bookstores, searching for art books and inspirations. It was a time I realized I have to become an artist and to live a life with art and music. At a bookstore, I found books of George O'Keeffe's and Wassily Kandinsky's artworks, and also a book by Kandinsky's writing named Concerning the Spiritual in Arts. Kandinsky sees colors when he heard music, and heard music when he painted. The idea of music appears everywhere in Kandinsky's paintings. He believed shades resonated with each other to produce visual chords and had influence on the soul. I keep seeing music in George O'Keeffe's paintings, especially the colors she uses and the organic forms inspired by nature. With sparks from Kandinsky's writing and my own experience in music, I wrote an essay titled Music in George O'Keeffe's Paintings, discussed how her works can be read as pure music. The essay was published on a national magazine named Art Education in 2006. In recent years, I read an essay titled George O'Keeffe's Favorite Music by Neil Shaw Cohen, who is a composer and multimedia artist. In the essay, he wrote, Miss Lin explains that George O'Keeffe was influenced by the concept of synesthesia, the experience of crossed senses, as it had been explored by European modernists such as Wassily Kandinsky. These artists sought to find the equivalence of music in color and imagery, and to find a universal language in art that transcends the specificity of language of direct representation. I started to apply my own music experience and imaginations into my artwork. It started from shapes and colors. This is a painting from 2005 titled Music Notes in Movements. At that time, I started listening to Chopin's Nocturne intensively. Imagine every scene I see, every space I went through is made of music. His music can transform spaces and visual experiences into a timeless moment full of beauty. In 2005, I graduated and started working as a part-time designer in Beijing. I put most of my time into art, hoping to continue painting. One day, a friend handed me a newspaper about an admission conference of top US art schools. So I went there and started thinking about art school. About a year later, I received admission with scholarship from Maryland Institute College of Arts and soon became one of the painting department undergraduate students. My approach in abstraction has expanded and tested with various methods and possibilities during the years studying at MICA. When many different theories and creative ideas infuses, music has become a background movement and played subconsciously in my work. I also took digital art classes with musician Jason Sloan, and in a project, I explored how colors can be used to create music. It was absolutely a failure of direct translating between colors and music, but it made me realize it is more complicated between the two senses than they appear to be. I took a studio art class called Color Abstraction with Professor Timothy App. With his guide, I kept music as a hidden thread and mixed it with different approaches, with forms, Two main directions are geometry and organic forms, which I see them as musical instrument building materials. One day in class, App left us a homework. It is to create abstract painting from observing nature. I turned to my studio apartment and started looking at the space. It was a white cubic space. All things are colorless. With music imagination, it suddenly turned into a colorful space, full of life. Before I arrived in the US, I collected a few records of ancient Chinese instrument music. This music reminds me a lot of very old memories that were beyond my age, beyond my time. They are sharp, complex, and full of mysterious power. The power flows onto my works and pushes me completed a series of work called mythology. I also imagine musical movements in topographical maps and tried testing these imaginations in painting. This is a map of Golden Buddha Mountain in Chongqing, China. At that time, I was very into music by a former rock singer who later turned into an experimental musician. His name is Dou Wei. I listened to many of his later albums, which are mostly only instruments or sound collected from life. They are very abstract. There were two albums named Sign of Rain and Entering Autumn. Reminds me a lot about mountains and river paintings in ancient times, and the daily lives people used to live are very close to nature. His music allowed me to see how nature changed in time, visually, and also as a musical movement. Exploring with jazz, tribal, folk, and contemporary music has brought me to different places and times. I create works with these mixed feelings, inspirations, and introduce found objects into my work. Found fragments of human life traces become music components to join a collage of improvisational creation. This piece is called Shadow, made in 2012 from Passage of Time series. There are pieces of canvases and linen from my studio, textiles from southwestern China, sewn together and stretched on a shaped frame. This is a piece from Agitated Meditation series, completed in 2015. In this piece, I introduced found textiles from southwestern China, India, Chinatown in New York, and internet. This is 67 inches diameter, sewn together and stretched on a shaped strainer. It will be exhibited at the Waters Art Museum in 2023 as part of a 2-year installation of contemporary and antique art at Asian and Islamic Gallery. With all these different explorations of music as under threads in my creative explorations, I kept thinking about piano. One day in 2008, Baltimore, a neighbor offered me a piano for free due to her family moving. I gave her a painting for her new home and she happily accepted. It was a beautiful aged piano. Since that day, piano returned to my everyday life. This is a painting I made during that time called When I Open the Piano. I stained vivid colors onto raw linen. Their brightness turned into an aged tone, just like playing a fresh song on a very old instrument. Later, I gave the piano to my friends at Micah when I graduated. A few years later, I bought my own piano to continue my study and practice. In 2009, I started working with round-shaped canvases titled 100 Melodies of Solitude, and imagine them as abstract instruments with their own sounds and musics. I kept the large open center compositions for a while and then moved on to various possibilities with concentric compositions. This is a compositional installation of 9 pieces of 46 inches diameter paintings, gathered in a diamond shape to create a larger chorus with different voice parts. 100 Melodies of Solitude Number 75 from 2015. In this painting, I was making a large field dominated by greens with repeated rings of soft, warm grays and blues. It is an example of strong dominant sound or melody with soft repeated traces of beats or sounds. Bach's music inspired me to see radiance of light and subtle change of spectrums. Sometimes I notice playful arrangements of color places placed in a well-managed order. And sometimes, if I zoom out a little bit, I see color groups stand next to each other to create a soft and balanced harmony. I will play a prelude in C minor by J.S. Bach later as an example to imagine these color groups. I study combinations of colors and forms that are able to embracing different possibilities and feelings of music. If a painting is universal as music, it could communicate more complex information that language have blocked out and divided. This piece is 100 Melodies of Solitude number 98 from 2019. I cannot give definition of what type of music it creates, but I notice people from different backgrounds naturally meditate with this piece more than other works. I encourage viewers to reflect on their own memories and connections with music, not only to view my work, but also open the imagination between visual and acoustic realms. The size of the paintings and composition shifts based on the capability of a space. I often think this in an acoustic way, like a stage. Compositional installation was invented as a way to create a symphony effect that includes multiple voice parts, and it was tested with various architectural conditions. This process not only involves the imagination of an artist's vision and a musician's demand to send sounds to the audience, it also takes a few attentions as a designer to express the idea accurately as a site-specific installation. This is a recent compositional installation at American University Museum as an expansive symphony effect study. The size of the piece is 220 inches wide and 160 inches tall. The form itself was inspired by circle dance forms, which is shared in various dances all over the world. Exhibition often makes me think of music movements. It is an effective way to thread individual artworks together and experience them in certain order as the viewer walks through the spaces. This is the exhibition plan for this show, final version. I was looking at the images of the space. It is a well-balanced space with a clear center line and a looping function of guiding audiences. Bach's cello suites came to my mind, and I let it play the entire time I was drafting out the show with existing paintings. Curator Rehema Barber, who also has a musician background, worked with her team to build a model of the space and tested my studies of plans and helped me remove and clarified a lot of uncertain extras and finally made it into a working musical movement that audience can view as a whole with the order suggested by the architecture or simply choose their own routes to imagine different music movements and create their own experience. This is a view of the show captured by a photographer in residence at Kia, Colin Woopert. The image transforms meditative possibilities of the show with balance and harmony. Agnes Morton says, "Beauty is in your mind, not in the rose." I wanted to add to that, music is in your heart. Thank you.
Okay, already. All right. Okay, I think it's on. Hello. Okay, sorry about that. Lindling, thank you so much for that. I have to tell you, I laughed a little bit at the end. I hope I didn't throw you off too much because Lindling was very specific about her layout and she was very generous. You were very generous with your time, and she went through several different layouts for us, which is why I chuckled a little bit when you showed the final plan. So I hope I didn't throw you off, but thank you so much for explaining like the iteration. It was really great to see sort of the evolution of your practice. So I'm going to just open this up for everyone else, but I will kick off with one question and I'll make it easy. Tell us what a day is like in the studio. Like, do you start by playing? Are you turning on the radio first?
We get up in the morning about 7 and we prepare breakfast for the kids and send the kids to school around 8:30. And my husband and I share a studio space. He's a designer. And we go back to the studio after drop off the kids. And I start painting around 9. And I will paint until 5 or 6.
Okay.
So just sitting in front of the easel and listen to music. That's pretty much it.
The entire time you're just listening to music. Do you ever put on just something really specific? Come in with like, this is what I want to hear right now, or?
I listen to other things too.
Okay.
But mostly music.
Okay. Okay. I had my one question. I have others, but I feel like there may be some questions out in the audience. We invite our viewers online to give us questions. I will get them and answer them. So if you have a question, please feel free. I see a hand. Yes, please. And I'll repeat it. Can you?
Couldn't hear the last couple words.
Oh, about what we're doing right now. I'm just opening the floor up to questions for everyone else.
Good. That's one of my first question is, how did you settle on circle?
The question is, how did Lindling Lu settle on circles?
Circle. I grew up in southwestern China, and there's a lot of tribes. My grandmother she used to be a traditional dressmaker, and she makes a lot of pleated dresses. I think that's like a first impression about circle when I was a child. And I always feel very connected to circles. And I also find a lot of circle forms in all kinds of forms of art. It comes to me naturally, yes.
A little bit more, if you could say, how did you choose, or did in fact it chose you?
I think it chose me. I think circle chose me. I feel circles are very much like a speaker, like a instrument in some way.
Yes, yes, I hear what you're saying. Are there other questions? Yes.
I'm just curious how you actually create the circles. I mean, I saw the exhibit, which is beautiful,
Thank you.
but I'm wondering how you can get such accuracy and consistency. Are you using inkjet printing, or are you actually there? How do you pick them, basically?
Okay.
The question
Technical
is,
question.
I'm gonna repeat the question just for the audience. The question is how you actually make the circle. So that is that's a good point.
Yes. So I tested a few different panel makers, the woodworkers, and I give them my specific requirements, and have very high standard about the accuracy. So they make the wood panels for me according to those accuracy standards. And then I bring these panels back to my studio, and then I use a very accurate compass to draw the lines. I stretch my canvas by myself, by the way. After I stretch the canvas, I prime the surface. Sometimes I prime, sometimes I use primed canvas. And I use the compass, and I draw, and I paint with my hand. There's no tape or anything. I hope that answers the question.
Are there other questions? Okay, yes, please.
How long does it take to create a single work?
So the question is, how long does it take to create a single work?
From the beginning usually is the digital study. I study circles digitally on my computer. I make a lot of digital studies at the same time. And I choose the one I really want to paint. I choose the one that really speaks for me, or I notice has a very unique voice, and I choose that study, and then I decide the size of the painting. And after I decide the size of the painting, I start painting. So usually, for example, a painting like 46 inches, it takes about 2 weeks from study to finish. Yeah. So every day I spend 8 hours.
I see another question, yes. Okay, I saw your hand first, but I'll take, okay, Pia.
So when you're listening to the music as you're painting, do certain keys have colors for you, or chords, or are the colors connected to the composer or the tempo, or how does that influence the decisions you make?
So the question is about the decision-making process and what the music does, like the different chords and the tones, so, yes.
Yeah. So my reaction to music is not like something very strict to the theory. It's not theory at all. So it's more like listening to music is like opening up the imagination of a visual world. It's really, the music really touched me emotionally, and that emotion opens up the imaginations, I guess.
I know there's another question, but I've been dying to ask this question. Is
Sure.
there ever a time that after you do the plan, you're painting, and then you just get there and you look at it and you say,
Yes.
that's okay. I'm
Yes.
just saying, I
I changed
wondered,
my
like, is that
mind.
you change your mind in the
Yes.
process. What do you do then?
If I'm really disappointed, very disappointed about a painting, I might just take off the canvas and restretch. Or sometimes, if the color is manageable, I sand it down, and the process is a constant change of color. So the first layer of color and the last layer of color, every layer is different, except the final 2 or 3 layers. They are pretty much the same. So it's like a constant changing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I know that I had a question, and thank you.
It was kind of related to what this gentleman spoke about.
Sure.
I was looking at your paintings and I was listening to pieces that were associated with them, and
Mhm.
I noticed that pitch and loudness and multiple instruments coming together seem to fit colors. I noticed that particularly with the drumming pieces, bass drum,
Yeah.
echoes. This sort of imagery came to my mind as I looked at your paintings. Did it come to your mind?
Yes, every time I listen to even the same piece, the imagination could be different. Actually, the music associated with the paintings, it's a collaboration between me and Rehema. It's
You're so generous. She's so generous to say that. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm waiting to hear how it's been a collaboration with the music. She chose all those titles.
I chose the pieces. The pieces had been playing in the studio, and they had opened up the imagination about the studies. And what was the specific question? I'm sorry. So
The elements of loudness and pitch and the orchestral
Yes.
aspects of it enter into how you express it on the canvas.
yes and no. Yes, I think there are in general. Yes, I think sometimes it's very subtle.
Mhm. Can I add on to that? Because I feel like now I get what you were saying about how it's collaboration. Like the set that you have downstairs of the 4 sort of smaller paintings, that was one of those times where I did, based off of how the music sounded, that I just said, yeah, that piece has
Yeah.
to go with that this work. So I get what you're saying about it, because it sounds it's like a really fast piece of music that goes with that sort of four piece sort of set that you put together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the simpler compositions usually make me connect to drums music more than the symphony.
I saw a couple of hands. I think I saw someone back in the back, and then I saw you in the middle, and then you over that way. So way in the back, please.
I realize, I'm sorry if you already spoke about this, but do you listen on headphones or do you listen with a speaker in your studio? And have you experienced with both and how does it affect your work?
Did you hear? She asked if you listen on with headphones or through the speakers, or do you experiment going back and forth?
At home, I play on my piano, and in the studio, I listen with my headphone usually, because it's a public building, and I don't want to interrupt other people's work.
Okay. Yes. The purple.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about your work. I actually also grew up in southwestern China.
Oh, cool.
Sichuan province. Yeah. So I was wondering if you talk about how Western music influences you. Do you also find inspiration from like Chinese music?
Yes.
Yeah, and then do you find inspiration from nature? Because Guizhou is
Yes.
also very beautiful province, right?
Mhm. Yes, I listen to all kinds of music from everywhere, every corner of the world. As long as I can find the music that speaks to me, I just listen.
And then I think yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious, just since I don't work as such with each piece of your work, so you have to, continue working on one piece again to catch the flow of your thoughts at the same time, finish it, or just you can come back, to finish it.
That's a good question.
I'm just curious about that.
The question is asking about whether it's going. I'm repeating it for our online audience. Whether you go back and forth between working on paintings or just work on one at a time.
I usually work on one painting at a time, but sometimes I work on multiple paintings at their beginning stage. But when I have to get a conclusion about this painting, I just focus on this one painting. without any interruptions.
I think you're also being very modest because for our show, Lindling created some new paintings for us.
Yes.
And then at the same time, there was a show I think that opened right before that you had also created new paintings for. So she was painting and painting and painting.
I'm taking a break.
Yeah. Yes. In the back, I see a hand, a little hand.
Yes.
Oh, what's your favorite color?
My favorite color. My favorite color is magenta.
Magenta. Magenta is her favorite color. Is there another question? Do we have questions from our online audience? Oh, yes, sorry.
I have a question. Lindling,
Yes.
I think I've told you before, my brother also studied painting at MICA.
Mhm.
And it was a surprise to me as a non-artist how much energy it took to paint, create
Yes.
work. You are so productive. Where do you get the energy? How do you summon the energy to be so productive for all these
I
years?
think it's the power of music. I think music has a lot of emotional energy. We usually ignore the emotional energies, but it's very powerful, and if you use it wisely, it will power you.
So I do think it's really interesting that you use the compass and then you apply the paint manually with no help, just going
Yeah.
around. That first circle is really important, right? Like the
Yeah.
first stroke.
Was a little bit sketchy.
Yes. So is it that in those first moments that is that just one stroke or is it several?
The first painting I did for 100 Melodies of Solitude, each ring has probably only 2 or 3 layers of paint, and I wasn't very good at the technique at that time. It takes time and years until I think I'm kind of like have a better control of the layers of paint.
I was also really struck by the shaped canvases that had the sort of sewn bits. I was really kind of curious, are you going to revisit that series? Because those were really interesting,
Yes.
the mixing of the different cultural
Yes.
fabrics and patterns. So I'm really curious about your thought process behind those as well.
I think I'm already visiting the series. I just got a new sewing machine, and I'm looking at the materials I have. I'm a fabric textile collector. I collect all kinds of things from thrift stores, from places I go, from friends and families. And I think it's a really good way to embrace my connections with people. Yeah.
So the melding of the different places and travels is also, it's very much about the places that you've been and the people that you've
Yes.
been with.
Yeah.
So there are these remnants, the
Yeah.
memories
Memories, yes.
are also into those sort of sewn scraps.
Mm-hmm.
Very poetic work.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Well, I have lots of questions, and we'll be here talking for quite some time. I had the real pleasure of finding your work, and I never do this, by the way. I found her work online. I actually follow the gallery, and I saw the pieces, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" I was so moved, and then I started following her and looking at her work, and really, there's a way that you have been able to imbue this sort of emotional quality in the work. Can you talk about that just a little bit more, and then we'll open it up.
Emotional quality. I think the culture I grew up is a culture that you don't express enough about your emotions. I think I always have that inside me and not able to communicate effectively. So I found it's very effective when I come to painting or come to music. I will just naturally let it out, and sometimes bring me very very good feedback, and it's a very good fertilizer for me as an artist.
Oh, wow, that's interesting for you to say that it's a fertilizer. So basically the process of you making and conceptualizing creates even more ideas and more work.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think that we have any more questions. So I'm going to close the online portion of the program, and then I think there's a special treat for our in-person guests. So thank you so much. I really want to, again, thank our attendees online. Thank you so much for listening this evening and watching. We thank Lindling Lu. We thank our patrons, Timothy and Joy Light. We thank also our audience that's here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.